Before we dive into today's story, close your eyes for a moment and picture this: a man standing at a gravestone before dawn, holding a ring he can no longer wear. A father who feeds his daughters but cannot remember how to smile at them. A ranch that breathes but does not live. Now imagine that on this particular morning, two young girls will make a choice that changes everything. They will bring home a wounded stranger, a woman whose presence will force their father to answer one question he has been avoiding for 2 years. Do you still believe in goodness? Jake Brennan did not think he had an answer anymore. But he was about to find out he was wrong. The sun had not yet broken over the ridge of Monument Valley when Jake pushed open the wooden gate of the small cemetery plot. His boots crushed the frost on the wild grass. The air smelled of sage and coming snow. He carried 3 wildflowers in his calloused hand, the same 3 he brought every Sunday morning. Yarrow for healing, Indian paintbrush for memory, desert marigold because Catherine had loved the color yellow. He knelt before the simple wooden cross. Catherine Marie Brennan, beloved wife and mother, 1845 to 1880. The words were already fading, worn by 2 years of wind and weather. Jake traced the letters with his finger, the way he always did, as if touch could bring her back for just one moment. He placed the flowers at the base of the cross and closed his eyes. No prayer came. It never did anymore. He had prayed every night when the fever took her, begged God on his knees while Catherine burned and shivered in their bed. The prayers had done nothing. She died anyway, her hand going cold in his, while their daughters slept in the next room, unaware that morning would bring a world without their mother. So Jake stopped praying. He came here instead 3 times a week and stood in silence. It was all he had left to give her. The first light touched the valley as he rose to leave. He did not look back. Looking back only made it harder to walk away. By the time he reached the ranch, the sky had turned from black to deep purple. The Brennan place sat in a hollow between 2 red rock hills, 80 acres of stubborn land that fought him for every blade of grass. The house was small, built from pine logs his father had cut 40 years ago. 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, a porch that sagged on the left side but still held. Smoke rose from the chimney. Grace was already awake. Jake tied his horse and walked to the well. The bucket came up half full. The water level had dropped again. Another thing that needed fixing, another task he would face alone. Inside, Grace stood at the stove stirring a pot of cornmeal mush. She was 13 but looked older, her brown hair pulled back in a bun like her mother used to wear. She had Catherine's eyes, green as spring grass, and Catherine's way of moving through a room with quiet purpose. She glanced at him, but did not smile. She rarely smiled anymore. "Good morning, Pa." "Morning." Rose sat at the table, spooning honey into a wooden bowl. She was 9 small for her age, with hair the color of wheat and freckles across her nose. She still smiled sometimes, but it was a careful smile, like she was testing whether it was allowed. "Did you see Mama?" Rose asked. Jake hung his hat on the peg by the door. "I did." "Did you tell her about the calf being born?" "I told her." Rose nodded, satisfied. She believed her mother could hear them wherever she was. Jake did not have the heart to tell her he was not sure of anything anymore. They ate in silence. The mush was bland but hot. Grace had added salt but no butter. They were running low. Jake made a mental note to ride into town before the week was out. After breakfast, Grace cleared the plates. Rose fetched water from the well. Jake stepped onto the porch and surveyed the work ahead. The fence along the north pasture needed mending. The barn door hung crooked. The autumn garden plot lay barren, choked with weeds. Catherine's garden. She had grown herbs there, medicinal plants she used to treat fevers and wounds. After she died, Jake could not bring himself to tend it. Now it was just another dead thing. He reached for his work gloves and caught sight of Grace watching him through the window. Her expression was unreadable, but he saw the question in her eyes, the same question he saw every day. "When will you come back to us, Pa? When will you be more than a ghost in your own house?" He did not have an answer for that either. By mid-morning, Jake was 3 fence posts deep into the repair work when he heard the girls laughing. The sound startled him. He could not remember the last time he had heard them laugh. He looked toward the house and saw Grace and Rose heading east, each carrying a woven basket. Rose skipped ahead, her yellow dress bright against the red dirt. Grace followed at a measured pace, a canteen slung over her shoulder. Jake straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "Where are you going?" Grace turned. "To Whispering Creek, Pennsylvania. Rose wants to pick berries." Whispering Creek was 2 miles away, a narrow stream that cut through a stand of cottonwood trees. The berries that grew there were small and tart, good for preserves. Catherine used to take the girls there every autumn. It had been their tradition. Jake hesitated. The memory of Catherine walking that same path rose in his mind, unwelcome and sharp. But he saw the hope in Rose's face, the way she clutched her basket like it held something precious. "Be back before 3, he said, "and stay together." "We will," Grace promised. They walked away, Rose chattering about how many berries they would find, Grace nodding patiently. Jake watched until they disappeared over the hill, then returned to his work. He told himself they would be fine. Grace was responsible. The land was safe. He told himself this and almost believed it. But the land was never truly safe. And 2 miles away, beneath the cottonwood trees, something waited that would change all their lives forever. Grace and Rose walked side by side, their boots crunching over the dry autumn grass. The morning had turned warm, the sun breaking through the clouds in shafts of gold. Rose hummed a tune their mother used to sing, something about a bluebird and a willow tree. Grace did not hum along, but she did not stop her sister either. "Do you think Mama would be proud of us?" Rose asked suddenly. Grace adjusted the canteen strap. "I think so. Why?" "Because we're doing what she used to do, picking berries, taking care of things." Grace looked at her sister, this small girl with too much hope in her eyes. "Mama would be proud," she said quietly. "And she'd be proud of you especially. You still know how to be happy." Rose frowned. "You can be happy too, Gracie." Grace did not answer. Happiness felt like a betrayal, like forgetting. And she was not ready to forget. They reached Whispering Creek just past noon. The cottonwoods formed a canopy overhead, their leaves turning gold and orange. The creek ran shallow, but clear, murmuring over smooth stones. Blackberry bushes crowded the far bank, heavy with fruit. Rose ran ahead, her basket swinging. "Look how many there are." Grace set down the canteen and began picking methodically, filling the bottom of her basket with the ripest berries. Rose darted from bush to bush, eating as many as she collected. Her fingers were already stained purple. For a few minutes there was peace. The sound of water, the rustle of leaves, the hum of insects in the warm air. Grace almost smiled. Then Rose stopped. "Gracie, do you hear that?" Grace paused, listening. At first she heard nothing but the creek. Then, faint and distant, a sound. A low moan. Human. Rose's eyes went wide. "What is that?" "Stay here," Grace said, but Rose was already moving toward the sound, her curiosity stronger than her fear. They followed the noise downstream past a bend where the creek widened into a shallow pool. And there at the base of a rocky slope, they found her. A woman, slumped against the trunk of a fallen cottonwood, her legs stretched out in front of her. Her hair was long and black, tangled with dust and bits of dry grass. She wore a doeskin dress torn at the shoulder. Her right leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and blood soaked the fabric around her calf. An Apache woman. Grace froze. Her mind raced through every story she had ever heard. Apache raiders burning farms. Apache warriors killing settlers. Apache women as dangerous as the men. But then the woman opened her eyes. They were dark and deep, filled with pain and something else. Resignation. She looked at Grace and Rose and did not move, did not reach for a weapon, did not threaten. She just whispered in perfect English water, "Please." Rose took a step forward. Grace grabbed her arm. "Rose, no. But she's hurt," Rose said. "She's Apache. So, she's dying, Gracie." Grace looked at the woman again. Blood pooled beneath her leg. Her breathing was shallow. Her lips cracked and pale. Dying. The word was accurate. Mama would help her, Rose said quietly, and that was the moment Grace had to choose. Fear or compassion. Safety or courage. The girl she had been before Catherine died, or the girl she was becoming in the aftermath. She thought of her mother, who had once set a broken arm for a stranger passing through, who had delivered a neighbor's baby in the middle of a snowstorm, who had taught Grace that healing was not about who deserved it. Healing was about what was right. Grace released Rose's arm. "Get the canteen." Rose ran back to where they had left it. Grace knelt beside the woman, her hands shaking. She had watched her mother tend wounds 100 times. Clean the injury. Stop the bleeding. Keep the person calm. The woman's eyes followed her. "You are kind," she whispered, "like your mother." Grace blinked, startled. "How do you know about my mother?" The woman's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I see it in your hands. Gentle. Careful. You learned from someone who loved." Rose returned with the canteen. Grace poured water into the woman's mouth. She drank greedily, coughing, then settled back with a sigh. "My name is Ayanna," she said. "It means eternal blossom." Grace. "And this is Rose." Ayanna looked at Rose, then back at Grace. "You should leave me. If your people find you with me, there will be trouble." "We're not leaving you," Rose said firmly. Ayanna closed her eyes. "Then you are braver than most." Grace pulled off her shawl and tore it into strips. She bound the wound as tightly as she could, trying not to think about the blood soaking into the fabric. Ayanna did not cry out, but her jaw clenched with every movement. "Can you stand?" Grace asked. Ayanna tried. Her leg buckled. Grace caught her before she fell. "We have to get you home," Grace said. "Our father can help." Ayanna shook her head. "Your father will not want an Apache in his house." Rose looked at Grace, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Will he? Grace did not know. Their father had not wanted much of anything in 2 years, but she knew one thing for certain. If they left this woman here, she would die, and Grace could not live with that. "He'll help," she said with more confidence than she felt. "He has to." Together, the two girls lifted Ayanna to her feet. She was lighter than Grace expected, her body lean and strong despite the injury. They moved slowly, Ayanna leaning heavily on Grace's shoulder, Rose supporting her other side. The walk back took twice as long. Every step made Ayanna's breathing more labored. Twice they had to stop so she could rest. But she did not complain. She only whispered thank you over and over, like a prayer. By the time they crested the hill above the ranch, the sun was slipping toward the western horizon. Grace saw her father in the distance riding back from the north pasture. He saw them at the same moment. Even from 100 yards away, Grace could see him go rigid in the saddle. Jake Brennan stared at the sight before him. His 2 daughters, supporting a wounded Apache woman between them, blood on their clothes, fear and determination on their faces. For a moment he could not move. Every instinct screamed at him. Danger, threat, get the girls away. But then he saw the way Rose looked at him, pleading, trusting, believing he would do the right thing. And he thought of Catherine. The last words she had spoken to him before the fever took her ability to speak at all. "Don't let the ranch die with me, Jake, and don't let yourself die either." He had failed the second part. He knew that. He had died with her in every way that mattered. But maybe, just maybe, he could stop failing now. Jake dismounted and walked toward them. Up close he could see the extent of the woman's injuries. The blood, the pallor of her skin, the way she trembled with exhaustion. Padre said, "She needs help." Jake looked at the woman. She met his eyes without fear, without anger, just quiet acceptance of whatever he decided. He made his decision. "Get her inside," he said. Relief flooded Grace's face. Rose smiled. Together they guided Ayanna into the house. Jake followed, his mind already racing through what needed to be done. Boil water, clean the wound, stitch if necessary. He had done it before during the war when he was young, and bullets were more common than bandages. He had not done it since Catherine died, had not touched another person with the intent to heal. But he would do it now, because his daughters were watching, and because somewhere he hoped Catherine was watching too. Inside the small house, Jake cleared the table with one sweep of his arm. Plates clattered to the floor. He did not care. Grace and Rose eased Ayanna onto the table's surface. She lay back, her breathing shallow, her eyes half closed. Jake rolled up his sleeves. Grace fetched the whiskey from the cabinet. Rose boiled water, clean cloth in the chest by the fireplace. Both girls moved without question. Jake leaned over Ayanna, examining the wound. Deep, jagged, likely from a fall onto sharp rock. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. Infection would set in if he did not act fast. "This will hurt," he said. Ayanna opened her eyes fully. "I have known worse pain." Jake believed her. Grace returned with the whiskey bottle. Jake poured a small amount into a tin cup. "Drink this." Ayanna drank. The whiskey made her cough, but color returned to her cheeks. Jake poured the rest over the wound. Ayanna's body went rigid, but she did not scream. Only a sharp intake of breath, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Rose brought the boiled water and cloth. Jake dipped the cloth, wrung it out, and began cleaning the wound with careful, deliberate motions. The blood washed away, revealing torn flesh beneath. He would need to stitch it. His hands shook as he threaded the needle. It had been so long. He closed his eyes, steadied himself, and remembered Catherine's voice. "You're good at this, Jake. You have gentle hands." He opened his eyes and began to stitch. Ayanna watched the ceiling, her jaw clenched. Grace held one of her hands. Rose held the other. The three of them formed a chain of quiet strength. When Jake finished, he wrapped the wound in clean cloth and stepped back. It was not perfect, but it would hold. Ayanna let out a long breath. "Thank you." Jake did not respond. He walked to the basin and washed his hands, watching the water turn pink. Grace broke the silence. "Where will she sleep, Pa?" The question hung in the air. The house had only 2 rooms. The main room where they stood, and the small bedroom where Jake had slept alone for 2 years. The bed where Catherine had died. Jake turned. His eyes went to that room, to the door he kept closed. "She can have my bed," he said quietly. "I'll sleep out here." Grace's eyes widened. "Pa, are you sure?" Jake nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He walked to the bedroom, opened the door for the first time in weeks, and looked at the bed. The quilt Catherine had sewn. The pillow that still smelled faintly of her lavender soap. He lifted Ayanna as gently as he could. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her into the room and laid her on the bed, arranging the quilt over her legs. Ayanna looked around the room. Her eyes landed on the small photograph on the dresser. Catherine smiling, holding a baby Rose. "Your wife?" Ayanna asked. "Yes." She had kind eyes. "Like your daughters." Jake swallowed hard. "Yes, she did. I am sorry for your loss." Jake looked at this stranger, this wounded woman who had every reason to hate people who looked like him, and saw only compassion in her face. "Get some rest," he said, and left the room. Outside, night had fallen. Jake stood on the porch staring at the dark hills. His heart pounded. His hands still trembled. He had just put an Apache woman in his dead wife's bed. The neighbors would call him a fool. Some would call him a traitor. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Grace's face. The pride in her expression when he said yes. The relief in Rose's smile. For the first time in 2 years, his daughters had looked at him like he was their father again. Maybe that was enough. Inside, Grace and Rose sat by the fire. Grace stared into the flames. Rose leaned against her sister's shoulder. "Do you think Pa's going to be okay?" Rose whispered. Grace thought about the way their father's hands had shaken while stitching the wound, the way he had carried Ayanna so carefully, the way he had opened the door to the room he could not bear to enter. "I think," Grace said slowly, "that maybe tonight is the first step. Toward what? Toward something better." In the bedroom, Ayanna lay awake, staring at the photograph of the woman who had once slept in this bed. She whispered a prayer in her own language, a prayer for the dead and a prayer for the living. Then she closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. Morning broke cold and clear. Jake woke on the floor by the fireplace, his back stiff and his neck aching. He had slept in his clothes, his rifle within arm's reach. Old habits from the war. He sat up slowly, listening. The house was quiet. Too quiet. He stood and walked to the bedroom door, cracked it open, and looked inside. Ayanna lay still beneath the quilt, her breathing steady. Alive. Relief surprised him. In the main room, Grace was already awake, kneading dough for breakfast biscuits. She glanced at him, but said nothing. Rose still slept curled on a pile of blankets near the fire. Jake poured himself coffee from the pot Grace had made and stepped outside. The sky was streaked with orange and pink. The land stretched before him, endless and indifferent. Somewhere out there, people would soon hear that Jake Brennan had taken in an Apache woman. Word would spread. Judgment would follow. Let it come, he thought. He was done running from hard choices. He spent the morning checking on the livestock and repairing the sagging porch step. By noon, Grace called him in for lunch. When he entered, he found Ayanna sitting up in bed, her back against the wall. Her face was pale, but alert. "You should be resting," Jake said. Ayanna shook her head. "I have rested enough. I need to see the wound, to make medicine." Jake frowned. "I cleaned it, stitched it." "I am a healer," Ayanna said quietly. "I know my own body. The wound will fester if I do not treat it properly." Grace stepped forward. "What do you need?" Ayanna's eyes moved to the dried herbs hanging from the rafters. "Sage, yarrow, golden seal. You have these?" Grace nodded. "Mama used to grow them. Then your mother understood medicine." Ayanna looked at Jake. "May I use them?" Jake hesitated. Those herbs were Catherine's. He had not touched them in 2 years, but he saw the logic in Ayanna's request. And he saw something else. She was not asking for pity. She was asking to take care of herself. "Use what you need," he said. Grace gathered the herbs and brought them to Ayanna. Under her direction, Grace crushed the sage and yarrow into a paste, mixing it with honey from the cupboard. Ayanna watched carefully, correcting her when needed. "You have good hands," Ayanna said. "Like your mother?" Grace nodded. "Mama taught me before she got sick. Then she gave you a gift. Healing is sacred work." Rose, now awake, crept closer. "Can you teach me to?" Ayanna smiled. "If your father allows." All eyes turned to Jake. He stood by the door, arms crossed, watching this exchange. He thought of Catherine teaching Grace to make poultices, the quiet pride in her voice when Grace got it right. "I allow," he said. Rose beamed. Ayanna directed her to fetch clean cloth. Together, Grace and Rose applied the paste to the wound under Ayanna's guidance. When they finished, Ayanna lay back, exhaustion clear on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. Jake motioned for the girls to leave the room. They obeyed reluctantly. He stood in the doorway, uncertain. "You did not have to help me," Ayanna said. "I did." Why? Jake looked at her, this stranger who had brought questions he thought he had buried. "Because my daughters are watching. And I want them to see a man who does the right thing, even when it's hard." Ayanna's eyes softened. "Your wife." She was the same kind of person. Jake's throat tightened. "Yes." "Then you honor her memory by continuing what she believed." Jake turned away before she could see his face. He walked outside, past the porch, past the barn, all the way to the cemetery plot. He stood before Catherine's grave and finally spoke aloud. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said to the cross. "I don't know if this is right or stupid or dangerous, but those girls, our girls, they looked at me like I was their father again. And He stopped, his voice breaking. "I forgot what that felt like." The wind stirred the dry grass. No answer came, But Jake felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he had carried for 2 years. He walked back to the house. That evening, after a quiet supper of beans and cornbread, Jake sat on the porch while Grace and Rose cleaned the dishes. Ayanna had slept most of the afternoon, but was awake now, strong enough to sit in a chair by the fire. Jake heard footsteps behind him. Grace emerged, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cooling air. She sat beside him without asking. They watched the sun sink behind the hills. "You did a good thing today, Pa." "Or a dangerous thing. Mama would have done the same." Jake glanced at his daughter. At 13, she was becoming someone he barely recognized. Strong, thoughtful, brave in ways he was not. "I know," he said quietly. "That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because your mama always saw the good in people, always helped. And sometimes—" He trailed off. Grace waited. "Sometimes I wonder if that's what made her sick," Jake finished. "All those people she touched, all those strangers she brought into our home." Grace shook her head firmly. "She died of fever, Pa, not kindness." The simplicity of the statement struck him. She was right. Catherine had not died because she was kind. She died because the world was cruel and random and unfair. Kindness had nothing to do with it. Grace stood. "I'm going to bed." "But Pa, yeah, I'm proud of you today. And I think Mama would be too." She went inside before he could respond. Jake sat alone, her words echoing in his mind. Inside, Ayanna had moved from the chair to the floor near the fire. Rose sat beside her watching as Ayanna braided a small section of her own hair. "Can you teach me that?" Rose asked. Ayanna smiled. "Come here." Rose scooted closer. Ayanna's fingers moved through Rose's hair with practiced ease, weaving 3 strands into a tight braid. "My daughter used to sit like this," Ayanna said softly. "Every morning she would ask me to braid her hair." Rose looked up. "Where is she now with my people? 3 days' ride south. Safe." "Do you miss her?" "Every breath," Ayanna whispered. Rose leaned back into Ayanna's hands. "I miss Mama too. Every day." Ayanna's fingers paused, then continued braiding. "Then we understand each other." From the doorway, Jake watched. He had not meant to eavesdrop, but he could not look away. The sight of Ayanna with Rose, both of them bound by loss, stirred something in him. A recognition. She was not so different from him. He cleared his throat. "Rose, time for bed." Rose groaned but obeyed. She hugged Ayanna quickly. "Good night." "Good night, little one." After Rose disappeared into the loft where the girls slept, Ayanna looked at Jake. "She is a sweet child. She is. You have raised them well, alone." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't raise them. I just existed next to them." Ayanna shook her head. "You are here. You feed them. You keep them safe. That is not existing. That is loving." Jake looked away. "It doesn't feel like enough. To them, it is everything." The words settled over him like a blanket, heavy but warm. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe he had not failed completely. "You should rest," he said, his voice rough. Ayanna stood slowly, testing her weight on the injured leg. It held. She nodded and limped back to the bedroom. Jake stayed by the fire long after she had gone. He thought about her words, about Grace's words, about the way Rose had smiled tonight, a real smile, the kind she used to give before Catherine died. Maybe he was not as dead as he thought. Maybe there was still a chance to come back. The next morning, Jake woke to the sound of voices. He sat up confused. It was barely dawn. Who would be here this early? He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. 3 riders approached from the east, silhouettes against the rising sun. As they drew closer, Jake recognized the lead horse, a big roan gelding, Warren Hayes. Jake's blood went cold. Warren owned the largest ranch in the territory, a sprawling empire built on land, cattle, and control. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and thick-necked, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw, a remnant from the Apache wars, he claimed, a badge of honor. Jake had never liked him, and the feeling was mutual. Warren reined in his horse 10 feet from the porch. 2 men flanked him, hired hands with hard faces and guns on their hips. Brennan Warren said. His voice was deep and gravelly. "Heard you got yourself a visitor." Jake did not lower the rifle. News travels fast. This territory's small. And when a white man harbors an Apache woman, people talk. She was hurt. I helped. That's all. Warren leaned forward in his saddle. That's all. You know what they did to settlers last year. Burned houses, killed families. And you bring one into your home. She's one person. Not a war party. One person today. 10 tomorrow. You're setting a dangerous precedent, Brennan. Jake's finger tightened on the rifle. My land. My choice. Warren's smile was cold. Funny you mention your land. I've been trying to buy it from you for 2 years. You always said no. But maybe now with your guest, the neighbors will pressure you. Make you an outcast. Then you'll have no choice but to sell. Jake understood now. This was not about Ayanna. This was about water rights. Jake's land sat on the only reliable creek for 20 miles. Control it, and you controlled the route to Santa Fe. My land's not for sale, Jake said. Everything's for sale, Brennan. It's just a matter of price or pressure. Warren pulled his horse around. Think about it. 7 days. Send the squaw away or things get difficult for you and your daughters. The threat hung in the air. Warren and his men rode off, dust rising in their wake. Jake lowered the rifle, his hands shaking with anger. He turned and found Ayanna standing in the doorway. She had heard everything. I should leave, she said. I am bringing you trouble. Jake shook his head. You didn't bring anything. Warren's been after my land since before you came. This is just his excuse. But I make it worse. Jake looked at her, this woman who had every reason to walk away. Maybe. But sending you away won't change Warren, and I won't let fear decide for me anymore. Ayanna studied him. You are braver than you believe, or stupider. She almost smiled, perhaps both. Inside, Grace had overheard the exchange. She pulled Jake aside. Pa, what are we going to do? Jake looked at his daughter. Her fear was real, but so was her trust in him. We prepare, he said, and we find people who will stand with us. Who would do that? Jake thought of the town, the people Warren had wronged over the years. There were more than a few. Leave that to me, he said. That afternoon, Jake rode into Red River, the nearest town. It was small, barely more than a main street, with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of houses. He tied his horse outside the store and went inside. Martha Jenkins stood behind the counter, a sturdy woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She looked up when Jake entered. Heard about your visitor, she said without preamble. I figured. Warren's been spreading the word. Says you're harboring a dangerous Apache. She's a healer. She's hurt. That's all. Martha studied him. You know this will bring trouble. It already has. Warren gave me 7 days. Martha's expression hardened. That man. She shook her head. He's been buying up land around here for years. Yours is the last piece he needs to control the water route to Santa Fe. He won't stop. I know. What are you going to do? Jake leaned on the counter. I'm going to fight, but I need help. Martha considered this, then she nodded. I'll put the word out. Quiet-like. There are people in this town who owe Warren nothing, some who owe him a beating. Jake almost smiled. Thank you. As he turned to leave, Martha called after him. Jake, your wife. She'd be proud of you. Jake paused, then nodded. He hoped she was right. Over the next 2 days, Jake visited others. Sam Porter, an old neighbor who had been cheated by Warren in a water rights deal. Father Michael O'Brien, the Irish priest who preached forgiveness but was not above standing for justice. Deputy Jim Collins, a lawman frustrated by a corrupt sheriff. Each conversation was careful, cautious. But one by one they agreed, not loudly, not publicly, but they would stand. By the evening of the 3rd day, Jake returned home to find Ayanna sitting outside, her leg stretched in front of her. She was stronger now. The wound had begun to heal. You have been busy, she observed, preparing. For war, for whatever comes. Ayanna looked at the horizon. In my tribe, when the enemy threatens, we do not wait. We make the home strong, we find allies, and we choose the ground where we fight. Jake sat beside her. That's what I'm doing. Good. Then you will survive. They sat in silence as the sun set. The air cooled. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Your daughters, Ayanna said. They are strong, like you, like their mother. Yes, but also like you. You taught them courage. Jake shook his head. I taught them fear. No, you showed them fear, and then you showed them how to face it. That is courage. Jake looked at her. The firelight from inside the house illuminated her profile. For the first time he saw her not as a stranger, not as a problem, but as a person. Someone who understood loss. Someone who knew what it meant to keep going when everything inside wanted to stop. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For reminding me what living looks like. Ayanna met his eyes. And you reminded me that not all men see only enemies. The moment stretched between them, fragile and honest. Then Rose called from inside. Supper's ready. The spell broke. They rose and went inside where Grace had laid out a simple meal. The four of them sat together passing bread and stew. Rose chattered about the chickens. Grace asked Ayanna about Apache weaving. Ayanna answered patiently, her voice warm. Jake watched them, his daughters. This stranger who was becoming less strange every day. And he thought just for a moment that maybe this was what Catherine had meant. Don't let yourself die. Maybe living was not about being happy again. Maybe it was about moments like this, small, quiet, together. That night, after the girls had gone to bed, Jake stepped outside. The stars were brilliant, scattered across the black sky like thrown salt. He heard the door open behind him. Ayanna joined him on the porch. Tomorrow is the 4th day, she said. I know. What will happen when the 7 days are over, Jake did not know. But he knew one thing. I won't send you away. Even if it cost you everything, Jake thought of his daughters, of the people who had agreed to stand with him, of Catherine's voice in his memory. Do the right thing, Jake, even when it's hard. Even then, he said. Ayanna nodded slowly. Then I will stand with you. I will not let your family suffer for my sake. Jake turned to her. You don't have to fight this. Yes, I do. You gave me shelter when you could have turned away. You gave me healing when you could have left me to die. I owe you a debt. You don't owe me anything. Ayanna's eyes were fierce. In my culture, debt is not about money. It is about honor. You honored me. I will honor you. Jake felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he had not felt in 2 years. Not love, not yet. But the beginning of something, trust, respect, partnership. Then we stand together, he said. Together, Ayanna agreed. They stood side by side looking out at the dark land. Somewhere out there, Warren Hayes was planning his next move. Somewhere out there, danger waited. But here on this porch, 2 people who had lost everything stood ready to fight for what little they had left. And in that moment, Jake Brennan felt something he had forgotten. Hope. Inside the house, Grace lay awake in the loft listening to her father and Ayanna talk. She could not hear the words, but she heard the tone, calm, steady, alive. She smiled in the darkness. Beside her, Rose whispered, Gracie, is Pa going to be okay? Grace thought of the way her father had looked tonight, the way he had smiled at something Ayanna said, the way his shoulders did not slump quite so much. Yes, she said. I think he's going to be okay. Good, Rose murmured, already drifting back to sleep. Grace closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring trouble. She knew that. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, her father was something more than a ghost. Tonight, he was a man willing to fight. And that was enough. The 4th day dawned with a strange stillness, the kind that comes before a storm. Jake woke early, his body tense with anticipation. 3 days remained before Warren's deadline. 3 days to prepare for whatever was coming. He found Ayanna already awake, sitting by the fire with Grace. They were grinding herbs together, their heads bent close in concentration. The sight stopped him. His daughter and this Apache woman working side by side as if they had known each other for years instead of days. Grace looked up. "Morning, Pa. Ayanna's teaching me how to make a salve for burns." Jake poured himself coffee. "That's good to know." Ayanna did not look up from her work. "Knowledge is the best armor. When trouble comes, we must be ready to heal as well as fight." Her words carried weight. Jake nodded and stepped outside. The land stretched before him, beautiful and harsh in the early light. He thought about the people he had spoken to in town. They had agreed to help, but words were easy. When Warren came with guns and threats, would they still stand? He had to believe they would, because if they did not, his daughters would pay the price. Jake spent the morning fortifying the ranch. He reinforced the barn door, checked his ammunition, made sure the well was accessible from the house. Small preparations, but each one mattered. By midday he heard hoofbeats approaching. His hand went to his rifle before he recognized the rider. Sam Porter. The old man dismounted stiffly, his weathered face serious. "Jake, got a minute?" "Always." They walked away from the house out of earshot of the girls. Sam pulled off his hat and turned it in his hands. "I've been thinking about what you asked, about standing against Warren." Jake waited. "I talked to my wife. She said I'm a fool if I do this, that Warren will destroy us." Jake felt his hopes sinking. "I understand." But then Sam continued, "I remembered something. 20 years ago, when my ranch was failing, your father loaned me money. No interest, no contract, just trust. He saved my family, and I never forgot that." Sam met Jake's eyes. "Your father taught me that some debts aren't about money, they're about character. So I'm standing with you, whatever comes." Relief flooded through Jake. He gripped Sam's shoulder. "Thank you." Sam nodded toward the house. "That Apache woman, she really a healer?" "She is. My granddaughter's been running a fever for 3 days. Doc Walsh says it's just a cold, but—" Sam trailed off, worry clear in his voice. "Bring her over. Let Ayanna look at her." You sure Jake thought of the paste Ayanna had made for her own wound, how quickly it had healed? "I'm sure." That afternoon Sam returned with his granddaughter, a pale girl of 7 named Annie. Her mother carried her into the house, clearly uncomfortable, but desperate enough to try anything. Ayanna examined the child with gentle efficiency. She felt her forehead, looked at her throat, listened to her breathing. Then she turned to Grace. "We need elderberry," she said, "and honey." "Can you find these?" Grace nodded, and hurried to the storage cellar where Catherine had kept her medicinal supplies. She returned with a jar of dried elderberries and a comb of honey. Under Ayanna's direction, Grace boiled the elderberries into a dark syrup and mixed it with honey. Ayanna cooled it carefully, then spooned it into Annie's mouth. The girl grimaced at the taste, but swallowed. "Give her this 3 times a day," Ayanna told Annie's mother. "The fever will break by tomorrow evening." Annie's mother looked skeptical, but nodded. "Thank you." As they were leaving, Sam pulled Jake aside. "If this works, word will spread. People will see she's not a threat." Jake hoped he was right. The next morning brought another visitor. Father Michael O'Brien arrived on a tired mare, his black coat dusty from the ride. He was a short man with kind eyes and hair gone mostly gray, but his handshake was firm. "Jake Brennan," he said, "I've come to offer my support." Jake invited him inside. Ayanna rose respectfully when she saw the priest's collar. Father O'Brien studied her with frank curiosity. "So, you're the woman causing all the trouble?" Ayanna's chin lifted slightly. "I did not ask for trouble, but I will not run from it either," good Father O'Brien said. "Neither will I." He turned to Jake. "I've declared your home a sanctuary under church doctrine. Warren can threaten all he wants, but if he acts against you, he acts against the church." Jake was stunned. "Father, that will make you an enemy of the most powerful man in the territory." "Then I'll be in good company." Father O'Brien smiled. Besides, I didn't become a priest to make powerful men happy. I became a priest to do what's right." Later that evening, as Father O'Brien prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Jake," he said quietly, "your wife was a woman of deep compassion. She believed we are put on this earth to help one another, regardless of who they are or where they come from. You're honoring her memory in the best possible way." The words struck deep. Jake could only nod. After the priest had gone, Jake found Ayanna sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. He sat beside her. "You have good friends," she observed. "I'm starting to remember that." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Ayanna spoke again. "In my tribe there is a saying, 'A man's worth is measured not by what he owns, but by who stands with him when he has nothing.'" Jake thought about Sam, about Father O'Brien, about Martha Jenkins and Deputy Jim Collins, people who owed him nothing but chose to help anyway. "By that measure," he said, "I'm richer than I thought." Ayanna smiled. "Yes, you are." The silence that followed was different from the silences Jake had known for the past 2 years. Those had been empty, hollow things. This silence was full, peaceful, almost comfortable. "Your daughters," Ayanna said. "They remind me of my own daughter, strong spirits, brave hearts. Tell me about her, about Kaya." Ayanna's expression softened. "She is 7, small but fierce. She loves to climb trees and catch frogs. Her father, my husband, he used to say she had the soul of a warrior." She paused, pain flickering across her face. "He died 5 months ago. Sickness, not violence. I'm sorry. As am I for your loss." Ayanna looked at him. "We are alike, you and I, both trying to live in the shadow of those we loved." Jake felt the truth of it. "Yeah, we are. The difference is," Ayanna continued, "you have your daughters with you. I had to leave mine behind to keep her safe. Every day apart is." She stopped, her voice breaking slightly. Jake acted on instinct. He reached over and took her hand. The gesture surprised them both, but neither pulled away. "When this is over," he said, "bring her here. Both of you. Stay." Ayanna looked at their joined hands. "Why would you do that?" "Because," Jake said slowly, working through the truth as he spoke it for 2 years, "I've been dead inside, going through the motions. But you've reminded me what it means to care about something beyond just survival. You've given my daughters someone to care for, someone who needs them, and they've come alive again because of it." He met her eyes. "So yes, bring Kaya here. Let my daughters have a sister. Let me." He paused, uncertain how to finish. Ayanna finished for him. "Let you have a reason to keep living." "Yes," he whispered. Ayanna squeezed his hand gently. "I will think about it." They stayed that way as darkness fell, 2 people bound by loss and slowly, carefully learning to hope again. Inside the house, Grace stood at the window, watching her father and Ayanna on the porch. Rose came up beside her. "What are they doing?" Rose asked. Grace smiled. "Healing, I think." The 5th day brought news from town. Deputy Jim Collins rode out mid-morning, his face grim. "Warren's gathering men," he told Jake. "Hired guns from as far as Tucson. He's planning something big." "How many?" 10, maybe 12, all armed. Jake's stomach tightened, and the Sheriff Jim spat into the dirt. "McCrae's in Warren's pocket. He'll look the other way, no matter what happens. So we're on our own." "Not entirely." Jim pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. "I've been keeping records. Every shady deal Warren's made, every bribe, every threat. If this goes to trial, I have enough to put him away for years." "If it goes to trial," Jake repeated. Jim met his eyes. "That's why we need to make sure you survive long enough to testify." After Jim left, Jake called a meeting in the barn. Sam Porter came, Father O'Brien, Martha Jenkins, Doc Walsh, even a few others from town who had their own grievances against Warren. 8 people in total, 9 counting Ayanna. Jake stood before them, feeling the weight of their trust. "Thank you all for coming. You know what we're facing. Warren has guns, money, the law on his side. We have." He gestured around the barn. "This, each other. That might not be enough, Sam said quietly. Maybe not. Jake agreed. But it's all we have, so we use it smart. He laid out a plan, not a fight, but a stand. They would gather at the church on Sunday 2 days from now, a public meeting where Ayanna would speak, where the townspeople could see her for themselves. Not a threat, not a savage, just a woman, a mother, a healer. If we can change enough minds, Jake said, Warren loses his power. He can't act openly if the whole town stands against him. And if the town doesn't stand with us, Martha asked, then we fall back here, to the ranch, and we defend it. Doc Walsh frowned. Against 12 armed men, Jake looked at Ayanna. She had been quiet throughout the meeting. Now she spoke. In my tribe we have a saying, the strong tree bends in the wind but does not break. We cannot match Warren's strength, but we can be the tree that refuses to break. The room fell silent. Then Sam cleared his throat. I'm in. One by one the others agreed. Father O'Brien would host the meeting at the church. Martha would spread word throughout town. Doc Walsh would bring medical supplies just in case. Jim Collins would be there in an unofficial capacity, ready to document whatever happened. After the others had left, Ayanna approached Jake. You are asking them to risk everything. I know. And yet they agreed. Why? Jake thought about it. Because Warren's been pushing people around for years. Maybe they're tired of being afraid. Maybe they see a chance to push back. Or maybe, Ayanna said softly, they see a man worth following. Jake shook his head. I'm not worth following. I'm just trying to do right by my daughters. That is exactly why they follow you. The 6th day passed in tense preparation. Grace and Rose helped Ayanna prepare a speech for the church meeting. They wrote and rewrote, searching for words that would reach hearts instead of just ears. Meanwhile, Jake drilled with Sam and the others who could shoot. They set up targets behind the barn and practiced until their hands were steady and their aim was true. Not because he wanted a fight, but because if Warren forced one, they needed to be ready. That evening, as the sun set, Jake found himself alone with Ayanna in the barn. She was checking the supplies they had gathered, medicine and bandages and herbs, arranged neatly in baskets. You prepare for the worst, she observed, and hope for the best. Ayanna turned to face him. Jake, if this goes badly tomorrow, if Warren comes with violence, I want you to know something. He waited. These days with you and your daughters have been. She paused, searching for words. They have been a gift. After my husband died, I thought I would never feel warmth again, never feel like I belonged anywhere. But here in this small house with these brave girls and their stubborn father, her voice caught. Here I have felt like I came home. Jake moved closer. Ayanna, she held up a hand. Let me finish. I know this may be all we have, these few days. So I want you to know that I will stand beside you tomorrow, not because of debt or honor, but because I choose to. Jake understood what she was offering. Not just alliance, not just friendship, but something deeper, something that scared and thrilled him in equal measure. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he said honestly. Neither do I. But perhaps that is how all good things begin, with uncertainty and courage in equal parts. She stepped closer. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. He had not been this close to anyone since Catherine, had not allowed himself to feel anything beyond duty and grief. But now, looking into Ayanna's dark eyes, he felt something crack open inside him. A wall he had built brick by brick over 2 years of mourning. Ayanna, he said again. This time her name was not a question. It was an answer. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his rough beard. You are a good man, Jake Brennan. Your wife chose well. And then before he could overthink it, before fear could stop him, Jake leaned down and kissed her. It was brief, tentative, nothing like the passionate kisses he had shared with Catherine in their youth. But it was real, honest, a promise of something that might be if they survived what was coming. When they pulled apart, Ayanna smiled. That she said softly was worth waiting for. Jake laughed, the sound surprising him. It had been so long since he had laughed. I should have done that days ago. No, the timing was perfect. They stood together in the fading light, hands clasped, two people who had found each other in the midst of loss and danger and impossible odds. And for the first time in 2 years, Jake Brennan allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved a second chance at happiness. From the barn door, Grace watched her father and Ayanna. She had come to tell them supper was ready, but stopped when she saw them together, saw the way they looked at each other, saw the kiss. She smiled and quietly backed away. Her father was coming back to life, and that was more important than any meal. When she returned to the house, Rose looked up from setting the table. "Where's Pa?" "He'll be along soon," Grace said. She paused, then smiled. "He's remembering how to be happy." Rose's face lit up. "Really? Really?" The two sisters hugged, relief and joy flooding through them. Their father had been gone for so long, a ghost in his own home. But now, finally, he was coming back, and tomorrow they would fight to keep him that way. The seventh day arrived with a crystalline blue sky, beautiful and cold. Jake woke before dawn, his mind already racing through everything that could go wrong. The church meeting was set for 10 o'clock, 3 hours away. 3 hours to prepare, 3 hours to convince a town full of frightened, prejudiced people that an Apache woman deserved their protection instead of their fear. He dressed in his Sunday suit, the black wool one he had worn to Catherine's funeral. It smelled of camphor and old grief. But it was all he had. In the main room he found his daughters already dressed. Grace wore her mother's blue dress, altered to fit her growing frame. Rose wore yellow, bright as sunshine. And Ayanna. Ayanna wore a simple dress that Grace had given her, one of Catherine's, that they had modified together. It was gray cotton, plain and modest, but on Ayanna it looked regal. "You look beautiful," Jake said without thinking. Ayanna's eyes met his. "Thank you. So do you," Rose giggled. "Pa's not beautiful. He's handsome." The moment of levity broke the tension. They all smiled. Outside, Jake hitched the wagon. The morning was cold enough that their breath misted in the air. As they prepared to leave, hoofbeats sounded from the east. Jake's hand went to his rifle, but the rider who appeared was Deputy Jim Collins, alone and unarmed, except for his service revolver. "Thought I'd ride with you," Jim said, "just in case." Jake nodded gratefully. They set out together, the wagon rolling slowly over the rutted road toward town. The ride took an hour. No one spoke much. Grace held Rose's hand. Ayanna sat with her back straight, her face calm, despite what must be racing through her mind. Jake kept his eyes on the horizon, watching for any sign of Warren and his men. They saw nothing. But Jake knew Warren was out there, waiting, planning. Red River came into view just after 9. The town looked quiet, almost deserted. But as they approached the church, Jake saw why. Every person in town was already there, gathered in the dusty square in front of St. Mary's. 50 people at least, maybe more. Some stood in tight clusters, talking in low voices. Others sat on wagons or leaned against buildings. All of them turned to watch as Jake's wagon rolled to a stop. The silence was deafening. Jake helped Ayanna down from the wagon. Grace and Rose flanked her on either side. Jim Collins took up a position behind them. Together they walked toward the church. The crowd parted to let them through. Jake felt their stares, heard their whispers, saw the fear and curiosity and anger on their faces. At the church steps, Father O'Brien waited in his vestments. Beside him stood Sam Porter, Martha Jenkins, and Doc Walsh, the allies who had promised to stand. But on the opposite side of the square, Jake saw Warren Hayes. He sat on his horse, surrounded by 10 men, all armed, all watching. Warren's scarred face wore a cold smile. The battle lines were drawn. Father O'Brien raised his hands. "Friends and neighbors," he called out, "thank you for coming. Today we gather not for worship but for truth." He gestured to Ayanna. "This woman has been the subject of much talk, much fear, much speculation. So I have invited her here to speak for herself, to let you see her as she is. Not as a phantom of your fears, but as a human being. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others frowned. Warren's smile widened. Father O'Brien stepped aside. Ayanna moved forward, standing on the church steps where everyone could see her. For a long moment, she simply looked at them. Then she began to speak. "My name is Ayanna. It means eternal blossom in my language. I am Apache. I am also a mother, a widow, a healer." Her voice was clear and steady, carrying across the square. "I know what you have heard about my people, the raids, the violence, the blood. Some of those stories are true. My people have fought. We have killed. We have tried to protect what little we have left." She paused. "I do not justify those actions, but I ask you to understand them. Imagine your home taken, your family scattered, your children hungry. What would you do? Would you fight, or would you surrender and watch everything you love disappear?" The crowd shifted uneasily. "I came to this land seeking plants to heal my daughter," Ayanna continued. "I fell from a cliff and lay dying. 2 children, Grace and Rose Brennan, found me. They did not see Apache or white. They saw a human being in pain, and they helped me." She looked directly at Jake. "Their father took me into his home, though it brought him danger. He fed me, sheltered me, gave me the bed where his beloved wife died." "Why?" "Because he is a good man, because his daughters are good children, because they understand what I have learned in my life. We are all the same beneath the skin. We all bleed. We all grieve. We all love." Warren's voice cut through the square. "Nice speech, but words don't change what you are." Ayanna turned to face him. "You are right. Words cannot change what I am. I am Apache, and I am proud of that. But I am also a healer. Ask Martha Jenkins about her arthritis. Ask Sam Porter about his granddaughter's fever. Ask any of the people I have helped in these few short days." She stepped down from the church steps and walked directly toward the crowd. People backed away, but she kept moving until she stood in their midst. "You say I am dangerous because of my blood, but I ask you, who is truly dangerous here? A woman who heals children, or men who threaten families for refusing to obey?" She pointed at Warren. "That man wants Jake Brennan's land. He has tried to buy it. When Jake refused, he used me as an excuse to threaten him, to frighten you, to make you pressure Jake into selling." Warren's face darkened. "You're lying." Ayanna's voice rang out. "Then why have you not asked the real question? If I am so dangerous, why have I not harmed anyone? I have been here for 7 days. I have lived with Jake and his daughters. I have walked freely. If I meant harm, I have had every opportunity. Yet here they stand unharmed and unafraid." She turned back to the crowd. "I do not ask you to trust me because I am Apache. I ask you to judge me by my actions, by what I have done, not what you fear I might do." The silence that followed was profound. Jake watched faces in the crowd, saw uncertainty replacing fear, saw people looking at Ayanna not as a threat, but as a person. Then a voice spoke up, Annie's mother, the woman whose daughter Ayanna had healed. "My daughter's fever broke just like she said it would. She saved her." Martha Jenkins stepped forward. "My hands haven't hurt this bad in years. She helped me when the doctor couldn't." One by one others spoke. A farmer whose burn Ayanna had treated. A child whose cough had disappeared after drinking her tea. Small healings, small kindnesses, but they added up. Warren saw his control slipping. He stood in his stirrups. "Don't be fools. She's playing on your sympathy. When she brings her whole tribe down on us, you'll wish you'd listened to me." Father O'Brien spoke up. "Warren, you've threatened this town long enough. You've bought land through intimidation. You've bribed officials. You've hurt good people for your own gain. Perhaps it's time someone stood up to you." Warren's hand moved toward his gun. "You want to try priest?" Before anyone could move, Deputy Jim Collins stepped forward. He pulled out a thick folder of papers. "Actually, Warren, I do want to try. I've been documenting your activities for 2 years. Bribery, extortion, Assault. I have signed statements from 12 people. I have ledgers showing illegal land transfers. I have enough here to put you in territorial prison for 20 years. Warren stared. You're bluffing. Try me, Jim said calmly. Make one wrong move today, and I file these with the federal marshal in Santa Fe tomorrow. The standoff stretched. Warren's men looked uncertain. The crowd watched, breathless. Then Sam Porter spoke, his old voice strong. I'm standing with Jake. Warren cheated me, threatened my family. I'm done being afraid. Martha stepped forward. I'm standing with Jake too. Father O'Brien. I stand with Jake, Dr. Walsh, and I. One by one, people stepped forward. Not everyone. Some remained fearful. Some stayed loyal to Warren. But enough. 20 people. Then 25, then 30. A majority of the town. Warren looked at his men. At the crowd. At the deputy with his damning evidence. His face went purple with rage. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, Jim said quietly. It is. You're done in this town, Warren. Go home. Sell your land. Move on. Because if you try anything against Jake or his family, you'll answer to all of us. And to the law. For a long moment, Warren looked like he might fight anyway. His hand hovered over his gun. His men tensed. But then Caleb Hayes, Warren's own son, spoke up. Pa, let it go. Warren spun to face him. What I said, let it go. Caleb's voice was firm. I'm tired of your bullying, tired of hurting people because you're too proud to accept no for an answer. I'm done. Caleb dismounted and walked away from his father toward the crowd. 3 of Warren's hired men followed him. Warren sat alone on his horse, abandoned by his own son, outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The rage on his face slowly gave way to something else. Defeat. He jerked his horse's reins and rode away, the remaining men trailing behind. The crowd watched until they disappeared. Then the square erupted in cheers. People swarmed around Jake and Ayanna, shaking hands, offering congratulations. Sam clapped Jake on the back. Martha hugged Ayanna. Grace and Rose were lifted onto shoulders and paraded around like heroes. Father O'Brien raised his hands for quiet. Friends, this is a great day. We have shown that courage and truth are stronger than fear and lies. Let us give thanks. He led them in a prayer. Even Ayanna bowed her head, respecting the ritual, if not the specific words. After the prayer, the townspeople began to disperse, but many lingered. They approached Ayanna with questions about healing, about her tribe, about her life. She answered patiently, and Jake watched as bridges were built, one conversation at a time. As the afternoon sun slanted across the square, Jake found himself standing with Sam Jim and Father O'Brien. That was too easy, Jake said quietly. Jim nodded. Warren's not the type to give up. He'll stew, plan, maybe try something else. So we stay vigilant, Father O'Brien said. We watch out for each other, Jake agreed. But for today at least, they had won. Grace appeared at his elbow. Pa, can we go home now? I'm tired. Jake looked at his daughter, saw the exhaustion in her face. They had all been running on fear and adrenaline for days. Soon, yes. Let me find Ayanna. He found her sitting on the church steps with Rose, both of them looking peaceful. When she saw him, Ayanna smiled. Ready to leave, he asked. More than ready. They gathered their things and climbed into the wagon. As they rode out of town, Jake looked back. People waved. Some called out blessings. The town that had been ready to turn against them now sent them off with warmth. It felt like a miracle. That evening, back at the ranch, they celebrated with a simple meal. Sam had brought a ham. Martha had sent preserves. Father O'Brien had blessed a bottle of wine which Jake and Ayanna shared while the girls drank cider. After supper, the girls went to bed early, exhausted. Jake and Ayanna stepped outside into the cool night. You were magnificent today, Jake said. We were magnificent, Ayanna corrected. All of us. They sat on the porch steps, shoulders touching. Above them, stars wheeled across the vast black sky. What happens now? Ayanna asked. Jake thought about it. Now we live. We work. We raise the girls. He paused. We see what comes. And us. What are we? Jake turned to look at her. I don't know, but I'd like to find out. Ayanna leaned her head on his shoulder. So would I. They sat that way for a long time, two broken people slowly healing each other under a sky full of infinite possibility. Inside, Grace peeked out the window and saw them. She smiled and returned to bed where Rose was already asleep. Everything was going to be all right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Warren might still plot revenge. The town's acceptance might prove fragile. Winter was coming and the ranch needed work. But tonight the Brennan family was whole, in a way they had not been for 2 years. And that was enough. That was everything. They rode back to the ranch in triumph, their small army singing and laughing. When they arrived, Grace and Rose ran out to meet them. "Did you win?" Rose shouted. Ayanna dismounted and knelt to embrace both girls. "We won." Grace looked at her father. "Is it really over?" "Really over," Jake confirmed. Rose turned to Ayanna. "Does this mean you can bring Kaya now?" Ayanna's breath caught. She looked at Jake, hope and fear warring in her expression. Jake nodded. "Yes, bring her home." Tears streamed down Ayanna's face. "Thank you. Oh, thank you." That evening they celebrated properly. Sam brought whiskey. Martha brought food. Half the town appeared at the ranch, drawn by news of the victory. They ate and drank and danced under the stars, a community united by courage and decency. Late in the night, when the guests had gone and the girls were asleep, Jake and Ayanna sat on the porch together. The land stretched before them, peaceful in the moonlight. "I'll ride south tomorrow," Ayanna said, "to bring Kaya." "I'll come with you," she smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined. "Jake," Ayanna said softly, "when I bring Kaya back, what do I tell her?" Jake considered the question. He thought about Catherine, about the love they had shared. Then he thought about Ayanna, about the woman who had brought light back into his dark world. "Tell her," he said slowly, "that she has a home, that she has sisters who can't wait to meet her, and that—" He paused, gathering courage. "Tell her that your mother's friend cares very much about both of you, and that maybe someday, if she's comfortable with it, he'd like to be more than just a friend." Ayanna leaned her head on his shoulder. "I think she'll like that very much." They sat together until dawn, two people who had found each other in the midst of loss and chaos, now beginning to build something new, something that honored what they had lost while embracing what they had found. Tomorrow they would ride south. They would bring Kaya home. They would start the next chapter. But tonight, under the vast desert stars, they simply sat together and breathed. Grateful, hopeful, alive. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation in Red River, 3 weeks of uneasy peace. Warren Hayes had not been seen in town, his ranch silent and shuttered. Some said he had left the territory. Others whispered that he was planning something darker. Jake chose to believe the first and prepare for the second. The ranch had settled into a new rhythm. Ayanna had become part of the family in ways both obvious and subtle. She taught the girls Apache songs while they worked. She showed Jake how to preserve meat using methods her people had perfected over generations. She made the house feel like a home again, but she had not yet brought Kaya. Her daughter remained with the Apache band 3 days south, safe but distant. Ayanna spoke of her every night, longing clear in her voice. Jake had urged her repeatedly to send word to bring the child north. But Ayanna hesitated. "Not until I know Warren is truly gone," she said. "Not until I know my daughter will be safe." Jake understood. But he also saw the pain in Ayanna's eyes, every time she looked at Rose and Grace, seeing in them the daughter she missed desperately. On this particular morning, Jake woke to find Ayanna already dressed and standing by the window. Something in her posture made him rise immediately. "What's wrong?" She pointed. "Smoke from the south." Jake looked. A thin column of black smoke rose against the dawn sky, perhaps 5 miles away. Too far to be a campfire, too dark to be a brush fire. "That's near the old Cooper homestead," he said. They both knew what it meant. Warren was making his move. Jake dressed quickly and stepped outside. Sam Porter was already riding up the path, his face grim. "Warren's burning people out," Sam said without preamble. "Hit the Coopers last night. Burned their barn. Left a message saying anyone who stands with you is next." Jake's blood went cold. Anyone hurt? No. They got out in time. "But Jake, this is just the beginning. Warren's not coming after you directly. He's going after everyone around you. He's going to isolate you, make people too scared to help." Jake looked back at the house where Grace and Rose were just waking. He could not let Warren terrorize innocent families because of him. "We need to end this," he said. "How?" Sam asked. "Warren's holed up at his ranch with armed men. We can't just ride in there." "No," Ayanna said, emerging from the house. "But we can bring him out." Both men turned to her. She stood straight and strong, her decision made. "Warren wants me," she said, "so I will give him what he wants. I will ride to his ranch and offer to leave the territory peacefully. In exchange, he stops threatening Jake's friends." "Absolutely not," Jake said immediately. "That's suicide. Perhaps. Or perhaps it is strategy." Ayanna met his eyes. "If I go alone, he will be confident. Overconfident. He will not expect an ambush." Jake understood what she was suggesting. "But I won't risk you as bait." "Then we do it together," Ayanna said. "You, me, and whoever else will stand. We ride to Warren's ranch. I offer to leave. When he shows himself, we make our stand. In front of witnesses. Force him to back down or show his true colors." "It's dangerous," Sam said, "but it might work." Jake wanted to refuse, wanted to lock Ayanna in the house and face Warren alone. But he saw the steel in her eyes and knew she would not be protected like some fragile thing. She was a warrior in her own way, and she deserved to fight her own battles. "All right," he said. "But we do this smart. We bring everyone we can, and we make sure the law is watching." By noon they had assembled their forces. Sam Porter and his 2 sons. Father O'Brien unarmed but present as a moral witness. Deputy Jim Collins in an official capacity. Doc Walsh with his medical bag. Martha Jenkins, who refused to be left behind. And 3 other townspeople who had been threatened by Warren. 14 people in total. Not an army. But enough. Grace wanted to come, but Jake forbade it absolutely. "You and Rose stay here. If we're not back by nightfall, you ride to Father O'Brien's sister in Santa Fe. Understand?" Grace's jaw set stubbornly, but she nodded. "Be careful, Pa." Jake kissed both his daughters and mounted his horse. Ayanna sat beside him on a borrowed mare, her back straight, her expression calm. They rode south in silence, a loose column moving across the red desert. The Hayes Ranch appeared after an hour, a sprawling complex of buildings surrounded by a wooden fence. Smoke rose from the main house chimney. In the corral, Jake counted 8 horses, Warren's men. They stopped 100 yards from the gate. Jim Collins rode forward alone, carrying a white cloth tied to a stick. "Warren Hayes," he called. "I'm here in my capacity as deputy. Jake Brennan and Ayanna wish to parley. Come out and talk." For a long moment nothing happened. Then the ranch house door opened. Warren emerged, flanked by 4 armed men. Caleb was not among them. Jake noted that with grim satisfaction. Warren walked to the fence, stopping 20 feet from Jim's horse. His scarred face twisted into a sneer, a parley. "What is there to talk about?" Ayanna rode forward before Jake could stop her. She stopped 10 feet from Warren, close enough to speak without shouting. "I am here to offer you peace," she said. "I will leave this territory. I will go south to my people and never return. In exchange, you stop threatening the people who helped me. You leave Jake Brennan and his family alone. You end this." Warren studied her, his eyes calculating. "Just like that. You'd run away. I would leave to protect innocent people from your violence. That is not running. That is choosing the greater good." Warren laughed. "The greater good. That's rich coming from an Apache. Your people don't know the meaning of good." Jake saw Ayana's hands tighten on her reins, but her voice remained steady. My people know suffering. We know loss. We know what it means to fight for what little we have, just as you do. I'm nothing like you, Warren spat. No, Ayana agreed. You are worse. My people fight for survival. You fight for greed. Warren's face went dark. His hand moved toward his gun. Jake tensed, ready to draw. But Jim Collins spoke up. Warren, think carefully. You draw that gun in front of a deputy and I arrest you right here. You have witnesses, a priest, respected townspeople. Whatever you're planning, it ends badly for you. Warren's hand stopped. He looked at the assembled group, counting them, measuring his odds. You think you've won, he said finally, but all you've done is make this personal. He pointed at Ayana. I don't want you gone. I want you dead. I want Brennan to watch you die. Then I want him broken and begging when I take his land anyway. The words hung in the air, ugly and honest. Jim Collins pulled out his notepad. Warren Hayes. I'm documenting this as a direct threat of murder. You just confessed in front of 14 witnesses. Warren's smile was cold. Documentation won't save them when they're buried. He turned and walked back toward the house. But before he reached it, Ayana called out, I have a counteroffer. Warren stopped, turned. What single combat? You and me, no guns, no men, just us. If you win, I leave forever, and Jake sells you his land. If I win, you leave this territory and never return. Jake urged his horse forward. Ayana, no, you're still healing. She ignored him, her eyes locked on Warren. Well, are you brave enough to face one Apache woman alone, or do you need 12 men to feel safe? The challenge struck Warren's pride exactly where Ayana intended. His men were watching. The witnesses were watching. If he refused, he looked like a coward. Fine, Warren said. Tomorrow, noon, at the old mission ruins halfway between here and town. Witnesses allowed. No weapons. Ayana nodded. Agreed. She turned her horse and rode back to the group. Jake grabbed her reins. What are you doing? You can't fight him. He outweighs you by 80 pounds. Ayana's smile was grim. Size is not everything. I have spent my life learning to survive. Trust me, I do trust you. But I don't trust him. He'll cheat. Then we prepare for that. She looked at the assembled group. Tomorrow we end this, one way or another. They rode back to the ranch in tense silence. Jake's mind raced through scenarios, each worse than the last. Warren would not fight fair. He would have men hidden. He would try to kill Ayana and claim self-defense, unless they were smarter. That evening, Jake called a council in his barn. The same people who had ridden out that morning gathered around a lantern, their faces grim. Warren will cheat, Jake said without preamble. So we need to be ready. Jim, can you deputize some of us? Make this official. Jim nodded. Already planned on it. I'll deputize you. Sam and Doc Walsh. That gives us legal authority to intervene if Warren tries anything. What about weapons? Martha asked. You said no guns. For the fight itself, yes, Ayana said. But our witnesses should be armed. If Warren's men try to interfere, we defend ourselves. Father O'Brien spoke up. I will not carry a weapon, but I will stand close enough to intervene if needed. Bless you, Father, but stay back, Jake said. I won't have you shot. They planned late into the night, positions for each person, signals if something went wrong, escape routes if it became a battle instead of a duel. Through it all, Ayana remained calm. She sat sharpening a knife, testing its balance, her movements precise and practiced. Grace and Rose watched from the loft ladder. Finally, Grace climbed down and approached Ayana. Will you teach me? She asked quietly. Teach you how to fight, how to be strong like you. Ayana set down the knife and looked at the young girl. You are already strong, Grace. You saved my life. You stood up to men with guns. You protect your sister. That is strength. But I'm scared, Grace admitted. Scared for Pa, scared for you, scared of what might happen tomorrow. Ayana pulled Grace into a hug. Being scared is not weakness. It is wisdom. Fear keeps us careful. The trick is not to let it stop us. Grace hugged her back. "Please don't die tomorrow. I have no intention of dying. I have a daughter to return to, and a family here worth living for." When Grace finally went to bed, Jake approached Ayanna. "You should rest too, soon." She looked at him. "Jake, if something happens tomorrow, if Warren—" She stopped, then started again. "If I don't survive, promise me you'll bring Kaya here. Raise her with your daughters. Don't let her grow up alone." Jake gripped her shoulders. "Nothing is going to happen. You're going to win. You're going to bring Kaya yourself. And we're going to be a family. You cannot promise that." "No," he admitted. "But I can promise to try. And I can promise that I—" He paused, the words difficult after 2 years of silence. "I care about you, Ayanna, more than I thought possible. So you damn well better come back to me." Ayanna smiled through tears. "I will try, Jake Brennan. I will try very hard." They stood together in the barn, holding each other as the night deepened around them. Tomorrow would bring violence and uncertainty, but tonight they had this moment, and they held on to it like a lifeline. The next day dawned gray and cold clouds obscuring the sun. Jake and his group left at 10, giving themselves plenty of time to reach the mission ruins and set up positions. The old mission sat on a flat plain, its adobe walls crumbling from decades of neglect. It had been built by Spanish priests 100 years ago and abandoned when the Apache wars made the frontier too dangerous. Now it stood as a ghost, a monument to failed peace. Jim Collins positioned armed men behind the broken walls, out of sight, but ready. Father O'Brien stood in the open, his black coat stark against the red earth. Doc Walsh set up a medical station in the mission's roofless chapel. At 11:45, Warren arrived with his men, 10 of them all armed despite the agreement. They spread out in a loose semicircle, clearly prepared for treachery on both sides. Warren himself looked confident. He had stripped to his shirt and pants, his muscular arms bare. A knife hung from his belt, the only weapon allowed. Ayanna emerged from behind the mission wall. She wore a simple leather tunic, her hair braided back. She carried no visible weapon, but Jake knew she had a small blade tucked into her boot. "The rules are simple," Jim called out. "No weapons except knives. Fight until one yields or cannot continue. No interference from either side." "Agreed," Warren said. "Agreed," Ayanna replied. They walked toward each other, meeting in the center of the ruined mission courtyard. Around them, witnesses formed a loose circle. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Warren circled Ayanna slowly. "You should have taken my first offer." Left quietly. "Now you die and Brennan loses everything anyway." Ayanna circled opposite him, light on her feet despite her recently healed leg. "Or I win and you slink away like the coward you are." Warren lunged. He was fast for a big man, his knife flashing toward Ayanna's midsection. But she was faster. She spun aside, his blade cutting only air. Her own knife appeared in her hand as if by magic, slashing across Warren's forearm. First blood to Ayanna. Warren cursed and pressed the attack. The fight was brutal and swift. Warren relied on strength and reach, trying to overwhelm Ayanna with powerful strikes. Ayanna used speed and precision, dancing away from his attacks and landing quick cuts whenever he overextended. Blood appeared on Warren's shoulder, on his thigh. Small wounds, none critical, but they added up. He was slowing, breathing hard. Ayanna, by contrast, seemed to float across the ground. She had not been touched. Her Apache training years of learning to fight larger opponents showed in every movement. Warren's frustration grew. He charged like a bull, abandoning technique for brute force. Ayanna sidestepped and drove her knife into his shoulder, not deep enough to cripple, but enough to make his right arm useless. Warren roared in pain and rage. He dropped his knife and tackled Ayanna, instead using his weight to drive her to the ground. They rolled in the dust. Warren's hands going for Ayanna's throat. She struggled, but his bulk pinned her. His fingers tightened. Her face began to turn red. Jake started forward, but Jim grabbed his arm. "Not yet. If we interfere, Warren wins by default." Jake watched in agony as Ayanna's struggles weakened. Her hand scrabbled in the dirt searching for the knife she had dropped. Her fingers closed around something else, a rock. She brought it up in a vicious arc, smashing it into Warren's temple. Warren's grip loosened. Ayanna sucked in air and hit him again and again. Warren rolled off her, dazed and bleeding. Ayanna staggered to her feet. She retrieved her knife and stood over Warren, the blade at his throat. "Yield," she gasped. "Yield or die." Warren looked up at her, blood streaming down his face. For a moment Jake thought he would refuse, thought he would force Ayanna to kill him and damn the consequences. But then Warren saw his own men watching, saw the witnesses, saw that he had been beaten fairly by a woman he had called inferior. His pride broke. "I yield," he whispered. "Louder," Ayanna demanded. "So everyone can hear?" "I yield," Warren shouted. Ayanna stepped back, lowering the knife. "It's over. You lost. Now honor the agreement. Leave this territory and never return." Warren struggled to his feet, one hand pressed to his bleeding head. "You think this is over? You think I'll just leave? You gave your word in front of witnesses," Jim Collins said, stepping forward. "And I'm holding you to it. You have 1 week to sell your ranch and leave. If you're still here after that, I file charges for everything I've documented. Extortion, bribery, assault, attempted murder. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison." Warren looked at his men. None of them met his eyes. They had seen him lose, seen him humiliated. Whatever loyalty they had once felt was gone. "Fine," Warren spat. "Keep your worthless land. Keep your Apache whore. I'm done with this God-forsaken place." He stumbled toward his horse, his men following. They rode away without looking back, a defeated army retreating in shame. As they disappeared over the horizon, the witnesses erupted in cheers. Sam clapped Jake on the back. Martha hugged Ayanna. Father O'Brien raised his hands in blessing. Doc Walsh approached Ayanna. "Let me look at your neck." She waved him off. "I'm fine, just bruised." Jake pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw. "You could have died," he said roughly, "but I didn't." She pulled back to look at him. "It's over, Jake. Warren is gone. We're free." Jake looked into her eyes and saw not just relief, but hope. Real, genuine hope for the future. "You're right," he said. "It's over. And we won." They rode back to the ranch in triumph, their small army singing and laughing. When they arrived, Grace and Rose ran out to meet them. "Did you win?" Rose shouted. Ayanna dismounted and knelt to embrace both girls. "We won." Grace looked at her father. "Is it really over?" "Really over," Jake confirmed. Rose turned to Ayanna. "Does this mean you can bring Kaya now?" Ayanna's breath caught. She looked at Jake, hope and fear warring in her expression. Jake nodded. "Yes, bring her home." Tears streamed down Ayanna's face. "Thank you. Oh, thank you." That evening they celebrated properly. Sam brought whiskey. Martha brought food. Half the town appeared at the ranch, drawn by news of the victory. They ate and drank and danced under the stars, a community united by courage and decency. Late in the night, when the guests had gone and the girls were asleep, Jake and Ayanna sat on the porch together. The land stretched before them, peaceful in the moonlight. "I'll ride south tomorrow," Ayanna said, "to bring Kaya. I'll come with you." She smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined. Jake, Ayanna said softly, "When I bring Kaya back, what do I tell her?" Jake considered the question. He thought about Catherine, about the love they had shared. Then he thought about Ayanna, about the woman who had brought light back into his dark world. "Tell her," he said slowly, "that she has a home, that she has sisters who can't wait to meet her, and that." He paused, gathering courage. "Tell her that your mother's friend cares very much about both of you, and that maybe someday, if she's comfortable with it, he'd like to be more than just a friend." Ayanna leaned her head on his shoulder. "I think she'll like that very much." They sat together until dawn, two people who had found each other in the midst of loss and chaos, now beginning to build something new, something that honored what they had lost while embracing what they had found. Tomorrow they would ride south. They would bring Kaya home. They would start the next chapter. But tonight, under the vast desert stars, they simply sat together and breathed, grateful, hopeful, alive. The journey south took 3 days. Jake and Ayanna rode side by side, following trails that only she knew, paths her people had walked for generations. The land changed as they traveled the red desert, giving way to pine forests, then to rocky canyons where eagles soared overhead. On the 3rd morning, they reached the Apache encampment. It was smaller than Jake had imagined, perhaps 15 families, living in traditional wickiups, scattered among cottonwood trees near a clear stream. As they approached, Apache warriors emerged from the trees, rifles ready. Ayanna called out in her language. The warriors lowered their weapons, recognition dawning on their faces. An older man stepped forward. He was perhaps 60, his face weathered and wise, his long hair streaked with gray. He wore traditional clothing and moved with quiet dignity. "Ayanna," he said in English for Jake's benefit, "you have returned. We feared you were lost." Uncle Ayanna replied, dismounting, "I was found." "By this man and his family," she introduced Jake. Red Skywalker studied him with sharp eyes. "The white man who protected my niece. I have heard stories, some good, some less certain. Judge me by my actions, not by others' stories," Jake said simply. Red Skywalker nodded slowly. "Wise words. Come, you must be hungry." They were led into the camp. People emerged from their homes, staring at Jake with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. But they greeted Ayanna with joy, especially the women who embraced her and wept. And then Jake heard a small voice, "Mama." A little girl emerged from one of the wickiups. She was 7, small and wiry, with Ayanna's dark eyes and a spirit that radiated from her like heat from fire. She wore a buckskin dress and her hair in 2 long braids. Kaya. Ayanna ran to her daughter and swept her into her arms. Kaya clung to her mother, crying and laughing at once. "Mama, you came back. I knew you would." "Of course I came back," Ayanna said through her own tears. "I would cross 1,000 deserts to reach you." Jake watched the reunion, his throat tight. He thought of Grace and Rose, of how he would feel if separated from them for even a day. The pain Ayanna had endured leaving Kaya behind suddenly became real to him in a way words could never convey. After a long moment, Ayanna set Kaya down and turned her toward Jake. "Kaya, there is someone I want you to meet. This is Jake Brennan. He saved my life." Kaya studied Jake solemnly. "You're the white man Mama told me about in her letters." "I am. She said you have 2 daughters, Grace and Rose. They're excited to meet you." Kaya looked back at her mother. "Are we going to live with them?" Ayanna knelt beside her daughter. "Yes, if you want to. They have a ranch in the north, good land, good water, and we would be part of their family." Kaya considered this with a seriousness beyond her years. "Will I have my own room?" "Despite everything," Jake laughed. "We'll make sure you do," Kaya nodded. "Okay then." Just like that, the decision was made. Children, Jake thought, had a way of cutting through complexity to reach simple truth. That evening, Red Skywalker invited Jake and Ayanna to his fire. They sat together while Kaya played with other children nearby, her laughter ringing through the camp. "You understand what you are taking on?" Red Skywalker asked Jake. "An Apache woman and her child in a white man's world. There will be those who hate you for it." "There already are," Jake said. "But we've dealt with them." Red Skywalker smiled slightly. "Yes, I heard about Warren Hayes, about the duel. You have chosen a fierce woman, Jake Brennan. I didn't choose her. Fate did. I just had the good sense not to turn her away." Ayanna reached over and squeezed Jake's hand. Red Skywalker watched the gesture. "You honor my niece. That is good." He paused. "There is something you should know. In our culture, when a man wishes to marry a widow, he must first prove himself worthy to her dead husband's family. You have done this by protecting Ayanna and opening your home to Kaya." Jake felt his heart pound. I haven't. We haven't talked about marriage." "Have you not?" Red Skywalker's eyes twinkled. Then perhaps you should. Ayana's face was unreadable in the firelight. That night, Jake and Ayana walked along the stream while Kaya slept in her mother's wickiup. The water murmured over stones, and somewhere an owl called. "Your uncle thinks we should marry," Jake said. "My uncle is wise." "Is he right?" Ayana stopped walking. She turned to face Jake, the moonlight silvering her features. "Jake, I know you still love your wife. I would never ask you to forget her." "I will always love Catherine," Jake said. "But that doesn't mean I can't." He struggled for words. "You've brought me back to life, Ayana. You and your daughter. You've reminded me what it means to hope, to care about tomorrow. I don't know if that's love yet, but I know I want you and Kaya with me. I know I want to wake up every morning and see you there. I know I want to build a future together." Ayana's eyes shone with tears. "That is enough, more than enough." Jake pulled a small object from his pocket. It was a ring, simple silver worn from years of use. Catherine's wedding ring. "I want you to have this," he said. "Not as Catherine's replacement, but as a promise. That I'll honor both of you. That I'll build on what I had with her and create something new with you." Ayana took the ring carefully. "In my culture, we do not have rings, but I understand what this means to you." She slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I accept your promise, Jake Brennan, and I make one of my own. I will stand beside you. I will help raise your daughters as my own. I will honor the memory of the woman who came before me, and I will love you as best as I can." Jake kissed her, then, deep and honest, a kiss that promised futures and acknowledged pasts. When they pulled apart, both were crying. "So," Ayana said, wiping her eyes, "when do we tell Kaya she's getting a father and 2 sisters?" Jake laughed. "How about tomorrow morning? Tomorrow morning is good." They walked back to camp hand in hand, two people who had found each other across a divide that should have been impossible to cross. They had built a bridge of courage, kindness, and hope, and now they would walk across it together. 2 weeks later, the entire group returned to the Brennan Ranch. Kaya rode in front of Ayana, her small hands gripping the saddle horn, her eyes wide as she took in the landscape. When they crested the final hill and the ranch came into view, Grace and Rose burst from the house, running toward them. "Kaya," they shouted. Ayana dismounted and lifted Kaya down. The 3 girls stared at each other for a moment, suddenly shy. Then Rose grinned. "Want to see my doll collection?" Kaya nodded eagerly. "Yes." The 3 of them ran toward the house, already chattering like old friends. Jake and Ayana watched them go, smiling. "Well," Ayana said, "that was easier than expected." "Give it time," Jake said. "There'll be fights over toys and space and attention. That's how siblings work. I look forward to it." They walked to the house together. Inside, Kaya was already being shown around, Rose pointing out every detail, Grace explaining where things were kept. The house rang with young voices, alive, in a way it had not been since Catherine died. That evening, Father O'Brien arrived to perform a small wedding ceremony. It was not official in the eyes of territorial law, which did not recognize marriages between whites and Indians, but it was official in the eyes of God and the community that gathered to witness it. Sam Porter stood as Jake's best man. Martha Jenkins stood with Ayana. Grace, Rose, and Kaya served as flower girls, scattering wildflowers across the porch where the ceremony took place. Father O'Brien spoke simply. Marriage is a promise, a choice to stand together through joy and sorrow, abundance, and want peace and struggle. Jake and Ayana have already faced struggles that would break lesser souls. They have proven their commitment not with words, but with actions. Now they formalize what their hearts already know. He turned to Jake. "Do you, Jacob Brennan, take Ayana as your wife? To honor her, protect her, and build a life with her?" "I do," Jake said, his voice strong. "And do you, Ayana, take Jacob as your husband, to honor him, stand beside him, and build a life with him?" "I do," Ayana said. Father O'Brien smiled. "Then by the power vested in me by God and this community, I declare you husband and wife." Jake kissed Ayanna to cheers and applause from the gathered crowd. The three girls jumped up and down clapping. Sam whistled. Martha wiped away tears. After the ceremony, the celebration began. Someone had brought a fiddle. Someone else produced a harmonica. Music filled the air as people danced and ate and toasted the new couple. Jake found himself surrounded by well-wishers. Sam clapped him on the back. Doc Walsh shook his hand. Even Deputy Jim Collins appeared grinning. "You did it," Brennan Jim said. "You stood up to the biggest bully in the territory and won. And you found yourself a hell of a woman in the process." "I got lucky," Jake said. "Luck had nothing to do with it. You made brave choices. You paid for them, and you earned this happiness." As the sun set, Jake looked around at the scene, his daughters dancing with Kaya, Ayanna laughing with Martha. Friends and neighbors gathered on his land celebrating not just a wedding, but a victory over fear and hatred. Catherine would have loved this, he thought. She would have welcomed Ayanna, would have loved the girls learning from each other, would have been proud of him for choosing courage over comfort. He felt her presence not as a ghost, but as a blessing. And he knew with certainty that she approved. The party lasted long into the night. When the last guests finally departed and the girls had fallen asleep in their beds, Jake and Ayanna stood together on the porch, looking out at the land. "What are you thinking?" Ayanna asked. Jake considered. "I'm thinking that 6 weeks ago, I was a dead man, going through the motions, waiting for my life to end. And now," he gestured at the house, at the land, at her, "now I have a reason to wake up every morning." Just a reason, Ayanna teased. Reasons plural. 3 daughters, a wife, a home, a future. Ayanna leaned against him. "I love you, Jake Brennan." It was the first time either of them had said the words. Jake felt their weight and their lightness at once. "I love you too, Ayanna." Brennan. They stayed that way until the stars wheeled overhead, until the cold drove them inside to the warmth of the house and the life they were building together. 6 months passed. Winter came and went. Spring arrived, bringing green grass and wild flowers and new calves. The ranch prospered under Ayanna's knowledge. She taught Jake Apache methods of water conservation, of crop rotation, of reading the land. The garden that had died with Catherine bloomed again, this time with both Western and Apache plants growing side by side. The girls flourished. Grace, at 14, had become a bridge between cultures, speaking Apache as fluently as English. Rose, at 10, had Kaya's wildness tempered by Kaya's 7-year-old wisdom. The 3 were inseparable sisters in every way that mattered. Word of Warren Hayes filtered back occasionally. He had indeed left the territory, selling his ranch for a fraction of its value. Some said he had gone to California. Others said Mexico. No one knew for certain, and no one cared. The town of Red River had changed too. With Warren gone, the stranglehold on land deals loosened. Small ranchers thrived. New families moved in. And slowly, carefully, bridges were built between the Apache bands and the settlers. Ayanna became known as a healer traveling to neighboring ranches when called saving lives that Doc Walsh alone could not save. She was paid sometimes in money, sometimes in goods, sometimes in nothing but gratitude. It did not matter. She healed because it was who she was. On this particular spring morning, Jake woke to find Ayanna standing at the window, one hand resting on her stomach. "What's wrong?" he asked. She turned and he saw tears on her face, but she was smiling. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right." Understanding dawned. "A baby." She nodded. "A baby." Jake crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. When autumn, October, I think. They held each other, joy and fear and hope mingling together. Another child, a bridge between their past lives and their new one. "What will we name it?" Jake asked. "If it's a boy," Ayanna said, "I was thinking Thomas. After your father." Jake felt his throat close. "And if it's a girl, Hope, because that's what she'll represent. Hope, Brennan, Jake said, testing the name. I like it. They told the girls at breakfast. The reaction was everything they could have hoped for. Grace cried happy tears. Rose whooped with excitement. Kaya demanded to know if she could help take care of the baby. Of course, Ayanna said, you'll all be big sisters. It's an important job. That afternoon, Jake found himself at Catherine's grave. He had not been here in months, his visits less frequent now that grief had transformed into memory. He knelt before the cross. Catherine, he said quietly, I wanted you to know, Ayanna is pregnant. We're going to have a baby. He paused, almost expecting some response. None came, of course, but he felt peace, a sense that Catherine heard him and approved. I still love you, he said. I always will. But I love her too now, and I think you would understand. You always wanted me to be happy. Well, I am. For the first time in years, I'm truly happy. The wind stirred the grass. A meadowlark sang. The world continued beautiful and indifferent. Jake stood and walked back to the ranch. Ayanna met him at the gate, Kaya on her hip, Grace and Rose beside her. His family. Everything all right? Ayanna asked. Everything is perfect, Jake said. And it was. The story could end here with this moment of perfect happiness. But life is not stories, and happiness is not an ending, but a beginning. Years would pass. The baby, a girl named Hope, would be born healthy and strong. Grace would grow up to become a teacher educating both white and Apache children. Rose would marry a doctor and move to Santa Fe. Kaya would become a healer like her mother, carrying on the tradition. Jake and Ayanna would grow old together, watching their children and grandchildren play on the same land where they had built their unlikely love. And when Jake finally died at the age of 73, surrounded by family, his last words would be to Ayanna. Thank you for giving me a second life. She would hold his hand and whisper back, thank you for giving me a home. But for now, on this spring morning in 1883, none of that has happened yet. For now, Jake Brennan stands with his wife and daughters, looking out at the land that had nearly broken him, but instead became the foundation for everything good in his life. For now, there is only this moment, this family, this love, and that is enough. That is everything. The sun climbs higher, warming the earth. Somewhere an eagle calls. The girls run toward the creek, their laughter carrying on the wind. Jake takes Ayanna's hand. She smiles at him, her face radiant with joy and promise. Together they walk toward the future, leaving the past behind, but never forgotten. Two people from different worlds who found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful in the light. A family, a home, a life, worth every struggle, worth every scar, worth every moment of doubt and fear, because in the end, love always is. The end.